I walked in on my wife planning to sleep with a total stranger just for the thrill of it. Her friends were hyping her up like it was some kind of victory. I didn't storm out. I didn't shout. I just stood there and watched. And I listened. Funny how the biggest betrayals don't come crashing in, they slip in quietly on days that seem normal. Mine showed up on a plain old Tuesday in June. Blue skies. 75 degrees. Nothing out of the ordinary until everything fell apart. Name's Logan. I'm 42, run a small tech business that pays the bills and lets us splurge on vacations now and then. Most people would call me the calm type, steady, even-tempered, not one for drama. We live in a quiet neighborhood where folks nod and keep to themselves. I've always preferred it that way. I've been married to Sabrina for 18 years. She's 39, still beautiful in that effortless way that turns heads. Her laugh fills a room and she's always had this easy grace about her. She works part-time at this fancy furniture shop, though lately she seems way more invested in her girls' nights than anything at home. Our son Ethan's 18 now, off at college out of state. He's figuring out his life, and I'm proud of that, even if the house feels a little too quiet without him. I used to think Sabrina and I had built something solid. Not perfect, but steady, like a house that might creak in the wind but never collapse. That's what I told myself anyway. Even when things started slipping. The soft touches stopped. Our talks turned into checklists, groceries, bills, laundry. And every time we had a quiet moment, her eyes were glued to her phone. I kept telling myself it was just a phase. Empty nest blues. But deep down, I knew. I could feel it. Like walking through a familiar room in the dark and bumping into furniture you swear wasn't there before. Her friend group didn't help either. Danielle, I tolerated. She was Sabrina's old college roommate, now a single mom raising 3 boys on her own after her husband cheated. She had this tough shell like she was always ready for a fight. Then there was Lexi, single by choice and obsessed with planning their nights out like a military operation. Chloe was the rich one who handed out relationship advice like candy even though I'd seen her sneaky texts and suspicious calls that told a different story. And then there was Kendra, the one who always gave me the creeps. That smile of hers wasn't friendly, it was hungry. She'd wrecked more relationships than I could count. These were the women my wife turned to. The ones she laughed with, vented to, escaped reality with. And with every night out she came back just a little colder. A little more, gone. Everything changed that Tuesday. I was supposed to be out golfing with clients until evening, but a stabbing stomach pain made me cut the game short. I left the 18th hole early, popped some antacids, and headed home hoping to just lie down and sleep it off. Instead, I pulled into the driveway to find the back door wide open and laughter drifting in from the backyard. I froze. Sabrina hadn't said anything about having company. But there they were, through the glass doors, her whole crew spread out by the pool with glasses of wine in hand. 2 o'clock in the afternoon and not a care in the world. He's gorgeous, Sabrina, Lexi was saying. When he smiled at you across the bar, I swear I nearly melted. I couldn't see her face, but I heard my wife's voice, full of energy I hadn't heard in years. Not when she talked to me, anyway. I should have walked away. I should have said something. But I didn't. My hand stayed frozen on the doorknob while my entire marriage unraveled right in front of me. So are you gonna see him again? Kendra leaned forward, practically salivating. Sabrina sighed and swirled her wine. He definitely wants to. I mean, he was bragging about his. She trailed off, and the group erupted in laughter. I'm tempted, she admitted. Just once, you know? Just to feel something. What about Logan? Danielle asked, her tone sharp. Sabrina gave a little shrug. Just once. No one has to know. He'd never find out. Lexi clinked her glass with a smirk. Just don't pull a Maya. That name made Danielle sit up like someone slapped her. That's not funny, she snapped. Maya destroyed her family, her husband, her kids. They were never the same. Sabrina just waved her off. I'm not Maya. I just want something different. Is that really so wrong? Chloe grinned. Hey, we deserve to feel good. Marriage isn't a prison. The rest chimed in, but my focus landed on Kendra. She was silent, but her eyes were glowing like she was watching the first spark of a fire she lit herself. And then Danielle spoke again, low and serious. I know exactly how this ends. Her words cut through the laughter like a blade. Silence settled. Sabrina looked confused, then quickly changed the subject. But I caught Danielle's face, her jaw clenched, her eyes hard like she was holding something back. Something important. I backed away without a sound, but my mind was roaring. The late nights. The strange perfume. The way she pulled away from me in bed. All the red flags I'd ignored, now screaming at full volume. Her own words, careless and cruel, confirmed every gut feeling I'd buried for years. Anger and heartbreak hit me at once. But one thing became crystal clear: I was done being quiet. I don't even remember deciding to move. One second I was frozen, the next I was storming across the patio, every step fueled by fury I didn't know I had. "Logan," she blurted, startled. "No guilt? Just irritated I showed up early." She was sprawled out on her lounge chair, sunglasses pushed into her hair, wine resting on her stomach like she didn't just detonate a bomb. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed her wrist and pulled her up. Her friends gasped. I stared right into her eyes, slow and steady, and slid the wedding ring off her finger. And that was just the beginning. "You're not my wife anymore," I said, every word sharp and cold like winter air between us. Before she could even begin to react, I launched the ring, 23 years of commitment, up and over the roof, gone in a clean arc into the unknown. Then I turned to her circle of stunned spectators. "You can help her pack. She's leaving today." My voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. Lexi's jaw dropped, hanging open like a broken cabinet. Chloe stood quickly, her expensive sunglasses slipping down her nose. "Logan, this is insane. You can't just—" I didn't let her finish. I gave her a firm push, not enough to hurt, just enough to knock her off balance and into the pool. The splash was oddly satisfying. I'd tolerated them for years just to keep the peace. That tolerance had just expired. As I walked off, I looked at Danielle, the only one who hadn't moved, hadn't said a word. Her face wasn't just shocked. It held something else. Something buried. "You were right, Danielle," I said, pausing for just a second. "You deserve better than this group. Better than this scene. But I won't come near you until this chapter's closed." She didn't speak, didn't nod, but the pain in her eyes said everything. Back inside, I locked myself in my office. I let the chaos play out in the background, the shuffling, the whispered arguments, the awkward goodbyes. 2 hours later, she was gone. Sabrina had moved into Lexi's guest room, temporarily, at least. Turns out, even after being exposed and humiliated, she didn't abandon her one-time thrill. That same night, she reached out to the guy from the bar. The next evening, they met at his messy apartment. "I like married women," he told her with zero shame, right after she explained she was separated. No strings. No drama. Even after the cold welcome, she still went through with it. She had made up her mind, and nothing was going to stop her from crossing that line. But what she found wasn't pleasure, it was emptiness. The experience was mechanical, rushed, and soulless. Whatever she thought she'd feel wasn't there. But instead of snapping out of it, Sabrina kept going. Pushed by Lexi and Kendra, she tried again. And again. Different men, same outcome. Each one left her feeling more alone than the last. Eventually, the silence crept in. Those quiet moments she used to ignore suddenly felt deafening. She missed the clatter of dishes I used to wash after dinner. Missed hearing Ethan's voice echo through the house during our Sunday calls. But what she didn't realize was the damage was done. I wasn't sitting around waiting for her to come crawling back. I had already shifted gears. Work became my focus, spreadsheets and meetings gave me clarity. They helped me feel in control again. Weekends were for Ethan. He started visiting more often once he found out what happened. One afternoon while we were hiking, he spoke up. "I always worried this might happen," he admitted. "Even in high school, Mom never seemed settled." 2 weeks after everything blew up, I was still working late when I heard a soft knock at the office door. It was Danielle, holding 2 paper bags from the bakery a block away. "Thought you might be hungry," she said gently, like it wasn't the most complicated thing in the world. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave. She had been Sabrina's friend after all. But I didn't. Something in her face stopped me cold. We sat at my desk eating turkey sandwiches, talking about trivial things, her kids' college plans, a quirky client I just signed. That one lunch turned into a pattern. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, she showed up around 1 p.m. with food and a calm presence I didn't know I needed. We moved from surface-level chatter to real conversations. One day, she talked about her divorce. Not bitterly, just with a kind of raw honesty. The worst part wasn't losing him, she said, picking at the crust of her sandwich. It was realizing how blind I'd been. She talked about the endless late nights, the work trips with no receipts, the excuses. I felt like a fool. "We only see what we're willing to," I told her. "Until we finally can't pretend anymore." And just like that, something shifted. I started looking forward to Tuesdays. Not just the sandwiches, but her stories, her laughter. It was unfiltered, genuine. Not like the forced, hollow giggles I'd grown used to with Sabrina. Still, I reminded myself, boundaries. She had history with my wife. This couldn't turn into anything more. Then one Tuesday in June, while we were sitting under the shade of a huge oak tree outside the office, she went quiet. Too quiet. "Can I ask you something, Logan?" she said, staring at her half-eaten sandwich. If someone who destroyed your family used to be your friend, should you still call her a friend? I lowered my coffee, eyes locked on her face. What exactly are you asking me, Danielle? But she had already turned her head, watching a squirrel dart through the lot like nothing was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in my head. So did what she'd said by the pool weeks ago. Sometimes the people you think are your friends are the ones who take everything from you. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Some crucial detail. Some truth she hadn't said out loud yet. As July rolled in with heat thick enough to melt steel, our weekly lunches turned into small moments of escape. She brought iced tea in mason jars, perfectly unsweetened, just the way I liked it. She remembered little things. Asked about Ethan's internship. Followed up on work clients with more care than Sabrina ever had. That biotech startup finally signed, she asked one Tuesday. I blinked. The one with the funding issues? Yeah, they did. How do you remember that? You mentioned it 3 weeks ago, she said with a small shrug, like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Being noticed, truly noticed, after years of feeling invisible, that meant everything. Danielle never complained about her ex. Never tried to take up space she hadn't been offered. And never once brought up Sabrina unless I opened that door. But the question still hung in the air, what hadn't she told me? And why did it feel like the truth was about to change everything? She didn't try to fix me or offer empty advice, she just listened. Asked the kind of thoughtful questions that make you feel seen. She even remembered the anniversary of my company's founding, something Sabrina never managed to do for our last 2 wedding anniversaries. Meanwhile, Sabrina's new life was quietly falling apart. Through the reluctant updates Ethan shared and the occasional whisper from mutual friends, I found out her so-called sexual reawakening wasn't going quite as planned. The guy from the bar, tall, muscular, well-equipped in every sense, ditched her after one night. Said something like, "Wait, you're actually divorced?" "Yeah, I'm out. I don't do commitment." And that became a theme. Other guys came and went, but they all wanted the same thing. No one cared about who she was. Just about what she could give. The freedom she'd been chasing turned out to be a cold, lonely place. Kendra and Lexi still dragged her to clubs every weekend, but even that lost its shine. Chloe, ever since that pool incident, kept her distance too. Sabrina was lost in the very world she'd once thought would set her free. One sunny afternoon, Danielle and I were having lunch on a park bench when something shifted in her expression as she brought up her divorce. "I had a friend once," she said, her eyes locked on the trees ahead, "who cost me my marriage. Did you ever forgive them?" I asked. She gave a small, bitter smile, but didn't answer. That night, her words wouldn't leave me alone. Restless, I opened my laptop and started digging through old photo folders. I scrolled through a digital time capsule of my life with Sabrina, and then I found them pictures from some faculty event at her college years before our marriage started crumbling. There she was, sitting close to a tall man I now recognized as Danielle's ex-husband. Nothing obvious, but something in their body language felt too familiar. And in one of those photos I spotted Danielle standing in the background. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't scowling either. But her eyes, they knew. Like she'd already seen the truth and was just waiting for it to catch up with her. Suddenly, everything started to fall into place. A week later, we were at a quiet cafe when Danielle brought up a memory I hadn't heard before. "I came home early from a charity thing once," she said, stirring her coffee like it was second nature. "Derek wasn't there. Claimed he was with a friend. That friend ended up being the person I trusted more than anyone." My hand clenched tighter around my cup. That night, I checked our old shared calendar, and it hit me, Sabrina's so-called girls' nights had ramped up right around the time Danielle's marriage ended. Then came the night that confirmed everything. Chloe threw a small dinner party at her beautifully renovated Victorian. Despite our separation, Sabrina and I both got invites, our social lives still tangled up in the same messy web. I only went because Ethan was home for the weekend. I stayed in the background, nursing a glass of scotch, quietly watching the room. Sabrina looked worn down. That spark in her eye? Gone. Meanwhile, Kendra was on her 4th glass of wine and getting a little too honest. "I mean, Sabrina's got guts," she slurred. "Only woman I know who'd sleep with her best friend's husband while the poor girl was pregnant." Silence. The entire room froze. Sabrina went pale. Her eyes flicked toward Danielle, who sat still by the fireplace. Then, slowly, Danielle stood. "No need to deny it," she said, her voice like ice. "I've known since it happened. But you really thought stealing my husband meant you won?" Sabrina didn't say a word. Just stared at her hands. No excuse. No apology. The next day, Danielle called and asked to meet. We parked by the lake where Ethan used to feed ducks as a little kid. She didn't ease into the conversation, just jumped straight into it. I was 7 months pregnant when I found out, she said, voice calm but tired. Derek moved in with Sabrina for almost a month. She called it a trial run. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. Sabrina never said a word about this. Of course she didn't, Danielle went on. When Derek realized she wasn't leaving you for him, he tried crawling back to me. I filed for divorce. Her tone didn't waver once. No drama. I didn't vandalize her car or rant on social media. I just started over alone. Raised 3 boys on my own while she told everyone I was unstable, said I had postpartum depression, and chased him away. Her voice cracked. Tears slid quietly down her face. You know how long it took to forgive myself? Just for trusting the wrong people. I sat there frozen. Fury towards Sabrina roared through me, but underneath it something else had started to grow. Guilt? Because I'd begun to feel something for Danielle. And part of me wondered if that made me just as bad. But then I reminded myself Sabrina had shattered Danielle's world first. She tore her friend's family apart, then pretended to be her shoulder to cry on. What was growing between Danielle and me? It wasn't revenge. It felt like justice, delayed but honest. By the time August rolled in, cool nights and fallen leaves gave my life a strange sense of peace. The divorce was nearly finalized, and my thoughts weren't consumed with what I'd lost anymore, but with what the future might actually hold. You should bring the boys over this Saturday, I told Danielle one afternoon. I'll fire up the grill. She hesitated. 3 teenage boys aren't exactly a light load. I miss the chaos, I said with a laugh. I miss having noise in the house. That weekend, the backyard came alive in a way it hadn't in years. Real laughter. Basketball echoing off the driveway. Voices without tension, just joy. Danielle's boys, Jude, 13, Noah, 17, and Aiden, 19, were respectful but real. Within the hour, they were dragging me into games. Uncle Logan, is this right? Jude asked, lining up a 3-pointer. I adjusted his elbow. There, now follow through. The ball sank clean through the net, and his grin lit up the whole yard. Something warm bloomed in my chest. And in that moment, I realized this could be the start of something real. But just when I thought the past was behind us, the storm I didn't see coming was already on its way. There was this familiar warmth that crept in, something I hadn't felt since Ethan was little. After dinner, while the boys disappeared downstairs to play some of the old video games I dusted off from storage, Danielle and I stayed outside on the patio. The night air was soft, and cicadas hummed all around as stars began to blink into the sky above us. Out of nowhere, she spoke. No one's touched me in over a year, she said, voice low but certain. I turned to her, surprised by the sudden honesty. You don't have to explain, I said gently. But she shook her head. I'm not explaining. I'm telling you what I want. She leaned in, kissed me soft at first, like she was testing something long buried. I didn't rush her. I let her lead, letting the moment unfold on her terms. When she finally pulled me into her arms, I could feel the slight tremble running through her. Later, in the quiet of my bedroom, that nervous energy returned. As we lay down, she pulled the blanket up high, stopping at her collarbone. I don't look like I used to, not after 3 kids, she whispered, avoiding my eyes. I'm not perfect. Not like the women you've probably been with. I gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked her straight in the eyes. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, I said. You're real. Not some image to impress people, just you. Her eyes filled with tears, and she tucked her head against my shoulder. No one's ever said that to me before. What happened next wasn't wild or impulsive, it wasn't the rush of new lovers. It was slower, more intentional. Every movement carried something deeper, something honest. For the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to be truly seen. Sabrina and I never had this. Not even in our best days. Every touch with Danielle answered some question I didn't know I'd been asking. Every moment was free of pretense, just raw, genuine connection. While Danielle and I were finally building something real, Sabrina's world was falling apart. 3 weeks after the blow-up at Chloe's dinner party, she showed up at my front door. It was almost midnight. She was swaying, barefoot, reeking of tequila, mascara running. Baby, please, she sobbed, pounding on the door. I made a mistake. Don't throw away 20 years. I didn't answer. I just watched from the security feed, expressionless. The woman outside was unrecognizable. This wasn't my wife. It was someone who had betrayed me and shattered the life of her closest friend, someone who had fully intended to cheat again without guilt until she got caught. The next morning, I sent a direct message to the lawyers. Proceed with the divorce. No chance of reconciliation. That's when desperation turned into bitterness. Once she caught wind of my connection with Danielle, everything shifted. Lexi, always ready to stir the pot, threw a fresh start party at Sabrina's apartment. Danielle, of course, got an invite. Friendly on the surface, but it reeked of setup. I should probably face them eventually, Danielle said when I asked why she was even considering going. That night, fueled by wine and ego, Sabrina backed her into the kitchen. Everyone's talking about you too, she slurred loud enough for the room to hear. How long's this been going on? Kendra, never one to skip a scandal, slipped in beside them. Isn't it wild how the single mom suddenly has lunch with her friend's husband every day? Danielle didn't even have a chance to speak before Sabrina lunged, yanking her by the hair. You stole my husband. The room froze. But Danielle didn't flinch. She calmly untangled herself and looked Sabrina dead in the eye. No, she said, her voice steady. You threw him away. I just happened to see his worth. Then, turning toward the room, Danielle let the years of silence fall away. Look at you all, she said, sweeping her gaze over them. Lexi, your whole life is the next party. Chloe, you preach morals while sneaking around. Kendra, your body's the only thing you lead with. And Sabrina, you ruined your family and cried when the fallout hit you. She picked up her purse, poised but burning with fire. I've held my tongue long enough. I don't need your approval. And not one of you deserves a man like Logan. Later that night, Danielle sat beside me on the balcony with a carton of sesame chicken in her lap, laughing as she retold the scene. You should have told them off ages ago, I said, grinning and twisting some noodles onto my fork. I couldn't, she said, smile fading into something softer. Not until I remembered who I was. The way the string lights lit up her face, I saw it. She wasn't the woman Sabrina once outshone. She was something stronger now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming herself. And this time she was ready for love without fear of betrayal. By the time September came around, the leaves were red and the air had that bite of finality. My lawyer called. It was nearly done. The divorce would be finalized in a matter of weeks. Oddly enough, I didn't feel relief. What I felt was clarity. Like I'd already moved on in every way that counted. Sabrina must have sensed it too. After the party blew up, her inner circle started fading away one by one. The next move? A desperate midnight call, this time when Danielle was at her own place with her sons. Logan, please, she sobbed through the phone. I still love you. I've always loved you. I stayed quiet, letting her say her piece. But the words that once cut deep now landed with no weight at all. When she stopped, all I said was, I hope you find happiness, Sabrina. But not with me. The next morning, Danielle and I were prepping breakfast, eggs sizzling, coffee brewing, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sabrina standing there, all polished up in the blue dress I once complimented years ago. Before I could say a word, Danielle stepped past me and shut the door behind her. I watched through the window as the two women spoke. No yelling. No drama. Just quiet words that stripped away whatever power Sabrina thought she still had. Later, Danielle told me what she'd said. This isn't your home anymore. And I'm not scared of you. That evening, we sat on the garden bench as the fireflies lit up the yard like tiny lanterns. I'd held this question in for weeks, and finally, I let it out. You knew I was married to her. You knew she destroyed your family. So why choose to be with me? Danielle looked down at her hands, fingers intertwined. Then she glanced up with the kind of honesty that makes you hold your breath. Because you're nothing like him. And you're not a thief, she added, meeting my eyes. I'm just taking back what should have been mine all along. I squeezed her hand gently and it hit me. This wasn't about rebound and it sure wasn't revenge. What I felt for her was love. Real, unexpected, and deeper than anything I'd ever known. Why didn't you ever tell me it was Sabrina who destroyed your marriage? I asked. She hesitated, the weight of it all lingering behind her pause. Because I didn't know if you'd believe me over her. Then everything spilled out. The day she came home early from a hospital shift, bone-tired after delivering twins, only to walk into her bedroom and find Sabrina with her husband. In their bed. Wrapped in sheets she'd washed that very morning. He left that night, she whispered. Moved in with her for 21 days. I counted everyone. What struck me most wasn't fury in her voice. It was exhaustion. The kind that comes from keeping a devastating truth buried for far too long. Forgiveness isn't the hard part, she murmured. It's facing the shame of staying silent. 2 days later, I met Sabrina at my lawyer's office for what would be the final chapter in our story. She showed up polished, dressed in a sleek suit, hope flickering in her eyes the moment she saw me. As the lawyers walked through the division of assets, firm but fair, you could see the realization slowly crashing over her. The finality sinking in. Tears started rolling down her face. Do you really have nothing left for me? She asked, once we were alone. After 23 years? Love needs tending, I said quietly, surprised by how calm I was. You watered your games. I nurtured us. She stood, arms open like she was reaching for one final goodbye. Just one hug? For closure. I shook my head, not out of anger, but self-respect. It's not because I hate you. It's because I'm saving myself for someone who truly loves me. Her hand trembled as she signed the papers, but the pen touched down just the same. When the legal dust settled in October, I asked Danielle and her boys to move in. That house, once a hollow echo of broken vows, was now full of life again. You could hear basketballs bouncing on the driveway, debates over math homework at the table, and the occasional slammed door when one of the boys lost at Mario Kart. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. We still made time for just us, 2 lunches a week, a quiet ritual that used to feel secret but now felt sacred. Sometimes we'd go back to that park bench where everything had started. Other times we'd try a new cafe or find some out-of-the-way spot where we could just be. One cool Sunday afternoon, I laid a blanket underneath that same old oak tree in the Stonebridge Park. Danielle's boys tossed a football in the distance while she poured coffee from a thermos. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small box I'd been carrying for weeks. "I'm not looking to replace what I lost," I said, flipping it open to reveal a simple sapphire ring, nothing flashy, nothing borrowed from the past. "I'm looking for someone to build something new with." Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded and held out her hand. That night, with her curled up beside me, I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how the darkest season of my life had led me here. Sabrina thought she'd found her freedom, but all she did was chain herself to emptiness. For me, what felt like a total collapse turned out to be something else entirely. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the start of the one you were meant to live all along. 1.5 years later, faster than I ever thought they could, because for once I wasn't just surviving. I was living. Our wedding was quiet and simple, just close family under the very oak tree where I proposed. No over-the-top reception, no spotlight speeches. Just 2 people making promises they actually intended to keep. We painted every wall in the house. Swapped the furniture. Filled the rooms with new pictures, ones that told our story, not the old one. Photos of hiking trips, of Ethan's graduation, of backyard barbecues where laughter drowned out the hiss of sprinklers. Ethan, now 22 and newly graduated with his business degree, surprised me one afternoon by saying he wanted to join my company. "I always planned to, Dad," he told me, grinning. "But now, coming home doesn't feel like walking on eggshells anymore." Even he and Danielle's boys bonded in ways I never expected. Aiden, her oldest at 19, is now studying engineering and interned at my firm last summer. Noah, 17, found his calling in plumbing, already earning solid money in his apprenticeship. And Jude, the youngest, just scored a full academic ride to Redwood State University. Every Sunday, all 5 boys crowd around the dining table, fighting over the last scoop of Danielle's pot roast and arguing over politics, playoff picks, and which Marvel movie aged the worst. Sometimes I just sit there, fork hovering, quietly stunned by what life handed me when I thought everything was gone. Danielle will bump my shoulder with a grin. "Hey, Earth to Logan, you're zoning out again." And I am, because sometimes joy feels like a dream you're scared to wake up from. Sabrina's life took a different turn. She lives alone now, a small 1-bedroom near the warehouse district, Willow Creek. And that's where her freedom finally led her. But as for me, mine led home. Sabrina still works the same job, from what I've heard. But the spark she once had for it seems to have dimmed. Old friends who used to cheer her on have drifted away. Kendra packed up and moved to Florida after getting slapped with a messy lawsuit from a married man she was seeing. Lexi's husband uncovered her affair and cleaned her out in their divorce. And Chloe's perfect housewife image finally collapsed when her husband caught her with the landscaper. Every now and then, Sabrina still sends Ethan a birthday text or a message at Christmas. She mailed him a graduation gift too. Something expensive, trying to keep that connection alive. But she never brings up what happened. Never asks for forgiveness. Never mentions what she lost. Last I heard, she's dating a guy who's already been divorced 3 times. Doesn't hold down a job, but he wines and dines her on her dime. Fancy dinners, her card. Her life now seems like a cycle of borrowed happiness. And you know what? I don't feel vindicated. Not angry. Not proud. Just still. Some people spend their whole lives chasing something they already had but couldn't see. One warm May night, Danielle and I were sitting out back, watching the sun slip beneath the horizon. The boys were inside, arguing over pizza toppings for movie night. their voices bouncing off the walls with familiar chaos. Long shadows stretched across the driveway from the hoop I'd installed last year. That thing had seen more hours of laughter and sibling rivalry than I could count. The first time I came here, Danielle said softly, I thought I'd always feel like Sabrina's shadow. I took her hand, my thumb brushing over the simple gold band she now wore, the one that replaced her old engagement ring. No, I said, you've always been the light that came after everything went dark. She smiled and leaned in, kissed my cheek. You know what today is? I shook my head. It's been exactly 4 years was finalized. Well then, I said, raising my glass of iced tea. Congratulations on making it through hell. She laughed, just barely, and whispered, thank you for not leaving me there. Later that evening, I stepped out onto the bedroom balcony. The boys were still going at it. Squeaking sneakers, shouted plays, and one final round of basketball under the soft glow of floodlights. Ethan sank a three-pointer, and Jude busted out a victory dance so ridiculous. It would have mortified him if anyone but family had seen it. Danielle appeared behind me, barefoot, wrapped in her favorite cardigan even though the summer night was warm. She had a mug of chamomile tea in her hands and leaned quietly in the doorway, just watching me. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. That look in her eyes still hits me like the first time, soft, knowing, full of something real. And standing there, I realized why this joy feels different. With Sabrina, I had roles to play: husband, father, provider, like I was performing in a script written by someone else. But with Danielle, I'm chosen, not assigned, chosen. Every morning, she chooses me, and every night I choose her, not out of habit, not from obligation, but because there's no one else in the world we'd rather share our lives with. Sometimes the perfect ending isn't where your story began. It's where you were always meant to be, but just didn't know it yet. And that night, as we lay in bed, her head resting on my shoulder, the sound of teenage laughter floating up the stairs, I finally understood. The betrayal that broke me had actually given me back my life. Because sometimes what feels like the end is really just a turn in the road that leads you home.